Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Professor Nancy Sinkoff, the Academic Director of the Alan and Joan Bildner Center for the Study of Jewish Life. I'm just delighted again to welcome Dr. Daniel Stein-Koken, our Reitman Visiting Scholar, to give the last part of a three-part class on the rhetoric and representation of the Jewish presence in the land of the State of Israel, with the first part, Points on the Map. Tonight's course is going to focus more on the maps that he's made, as well as some of the imaginary points that appear in fiction. But we're going to use tonight, actually just do a little bit more of a deep dive on the mapping project itself. Although all those of you who have participated before know that you were muted, that you have questions, you should post them to the chat. That will stop roughly 25 minutes in, and I'll pose some questions to Dr. Stein-Koken. He'll continue, and then we'll close up with some more questions at the very end. You know it's being transcribed, that you can hit CC on the bottom of your screen so you can have a simultaneous transcription. I think you also know that it will be posted on the website of the Bildner Center for a later refresher, or if you want to share it with people. So again, tonight's session is called Points of the Imagination, but we're tweaking it a little bit. We're going to real maps and the imaginary towards the end. And I want to welcome again Daniel Stein-Koken. It's been such a pleasure to have him here at Rutgers, working with us in his mini course, giving a faculty seminar, and also working with the Rutgers Initiative for the book on his Labyrinth project. So welcome everyone, and here is Dr. Daniel Stein-Koken.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much, Nancy, for the kind introduction. And thanks to Nancy, thank you, Nancy Sinkoff, and all the Bildner Center staff and faculty for their warm hospitality this semester. It has really been such a pleasure for me to have the privilege of spending time with you. Very sad that that time is quickly coming to a close, but all the more happy that I was able to have it. Thanks to all those who are there watching, and as I like to say, wherever and whenever you are. And let's get started. So in the first installment of this series, we explored the rhetoric of points, nekudot, and saw how they reflect the centrality of the creation of a Jewish map for the Zionist project. And then we saw how in the decades after its emergence, different voices referred back to it, intensified it, used it as a basis for re-examining and to some degree critiquing the Zionist project, or the project of creating points on the map. Last week, as you just heard, I provided background upon and then introduced my project, All the Points, which of course takes its name from this tradition of points, but expands it from referring solely to Jewish points on the map to really honoring and including all those who have called this small and so fought over and so loved land their home. And it was brought to my attention that last week went a little bit too fast with the map, so I'm very happy to just actually, as Nancy just said, do more of a deep dive into the map this week. And I do plan to say a little bit about the points of the imagination towards the close, and hope to provide also a video for those interested down the road to learn more about the points of the imagination. So I've actually renamed this session, and here let's just share my screen. Some more. Last week we had some of all the points, and whoops, went too fast. Today we have some more of all the points. So, and again, here you see the points of the imagination, just to pique your interest as we come toward the close of this session tonight. Okay, so just to situate us again, the map begins in 1840, and will initially be concerned with the period of time in which the land of Israel, Palestine, is under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Here you see an American map of the Ottoman Empire towards the close of the 19th century. And we're going to zoom in here to Ottoman Syria, and you'll see that basically what today is Israel or Palestine, or the Israeli-Palestinian region, whatever you want to call it, was really divided into different regions at the time. You have sort of Syria, the province of Syria, off to the right, and to the east, and to the north, and then you have the orange to the south was the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem. It was a special administrative district under the direct supervision of the Ottoman central government. And then to the north, you had the Vilayet of Beirut, Vilayet being in a major administrative district in the Ottoman Empire with its own governor. If we zoom in more, there were various sanjaks, which are special administrative districts that comprised this territory. And having provided that background, just where we are geopolitically, I'm now going to toggle to the map itself. And we are in the year 1868. The map again starts in 1840, but we're going to start in 1868 because that's really where things start to begin to get interesting. You see, of course, lots of green, which represent Arab villages. There were also lots of nomadic Bedouin tribes. We briefly referred to them, who cannot be so easily documented here. Just 1 second. Oops. This is where I want to be, sorry. And so these villages, they often were found, as we talked about last time, sort of on hillsides descending down into the valley. Here's Ein Karim or Ein Kerem, very famous Arab village just outside of Jerusalem. Here's actually what it looks like today. But in addition to the Arab villages, there were also cities, and in a number of these places, you did also have Jewish population. If you look closely on the map, and I hope down the road to be able to accentuate these more, you'll see points that are actually half green and half blue. Places like Haifa here, or Peki'in up here to the north, or Jaffa down here to the south. There were a number of places where Jews were also present in this time. And in particular, I want to highlight really two important concepts for thinking about the Jewish population of the land in this period. One is this concept of the Yishuv. The collective body of the Jewish presence in Eretz Yisrael prior to the founding of Israel. And we speak of really two kinds of Yishuv, the Yishuv Yashan, the old Yishuv, and the Yishuv Chadash, the new Yishuv. So in this period of time, the new Yishuv is really that collective body that emerges in the context of Zionist settlement. So here we're really dealing with the older presence of Jews in the land of Israel. And we often speak of the four holy cities, Jerusalem, Hebron, Tiberias, and Safed. This is a concept that really goes back to the practice of collecting alms from the diaspora to support the students and others and the poor who lived in these communities. Those were the four main places of Jewish concentration at the time. But there were other places in which Jews lived. Peki'in, that I just mentioned before, far in the Upper Galilee, generally said to be perhaps the only place in the land of Israel where there's been a continuous Jewish presence. And just to give you a sense of the dimensions of the population in these places, population of Palestine in this period was not just a matter of several hundred thousand, not more. But by 1844, Jews comprised nearly half of the population of Jerusalem. They were represented a little over 7,000 of its 15,000 inhabitants. And for much of the 19th century, Jews were a plurality of the population of Jerusalem. All right, let's go back to the map. And as we move forward here, you see in 1869, you see these magenta points. Spoke briefly about them last week. These are the first European Christian colonies in the land. These in particular are Templar settlements. Who were the Templars? Here we are. Who were the Templars? Here I actually had four nice pictures of the four holy cities for you. So you can see Tiberias up on the upper right, Safed on the upper left, the old city of Jerusalem, and Hebron. Really beautiful pictures and lithographs from the 19th century. All right, so eventually here you see a map of where these European Christian colonies emerged. And I just referred to the Templars, who were a radical pietist group that emerged in Germany during the mid-19th century, believed that in order to ensure the salvation of humanity, there needed to be Christian communities formed. They needed to be formed in the land of Israel because the return The second coming was going to take place in Jerusalem imminently, and the Templars arrive in Haifa in 1868, and as you just saw here, begin to found communities elsewhere in the land. Here you see the German colony that they founded in Haifa, which remains to this day actually a very visible part of the city. Here we are looking down from the Baha'i shrine toward the port, and you see those red roofs. Ben Gurion Street, that was the heart of the German colony of Haifa. Okay, and then, keeps wanting me to go to, here we are. We're going to go now moving forward, and you see a little white diagonal that emerged just south of today's Tel Aviv, and that was the Mikveh Israel, Hope of Israel Agricultural School that was founded in 1870. This is really the first Jewish founding outside of Jerusalem. There were some neighborhoods that had already been founded outside the old city, but this is really sort of the beginning of the story. And then as we head back and start to move forward in time, we start to see in these yellow points the earliest moshavot, or Jewish farming colonies. And I want to in particular draw your attention to Petach Tikva, just a little bit to the northeast of Tel Aviv, which, though it was the first to be founded, though it didn't really survive initially, but then was refounded and lays claim to being the Em of the Moshavot, Em HaMoshavot, the mother of the Moshavot, became a very important center for citrus cultivation. And these communities, they were initially farming villages. Individuals owned private farms, initially field crops, then moving more to viniculture, wine was produced, citrus, and so forth. And Petach Tikva is today, started out, here you see it at its very beginnings. Here you see it today. It's today the fifth largest city in Israel with over 250,000 inhabitants. So let's go back to the map, and I'm just going to keep this going. You see a modest expansion, founding of additional moshavot as we come to 1907. And at this point, as we head into the next
Daniel,
year,
can you just show people what you're doing? It's going very fast. You're populating the map, and I'm not sure everyone also sees that you're also chronologically going year by year. You know that's happening, but I'm not sure everyone.
okay, thank you for pointing that out. I hope people can see the time bar at the bottom of the screen and
Right,
see
it's worth, I think, explaining that.
that we're in 1908 right now. So I have been basically you can actually, the map enables you can press play right here, and the map will just sort of, proceed on its own. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm doing it manually, and you have the potential to go back in time, forward in time. I'm not going to do it now, but if you go to the little point on the time bar, you can actually open it and look at an interval of time. So you really can have the opportunity to manipulate the map as you like. And of course, as we've talked about, you can filter communities in and out, and we're going to do that actually in just a few minutes. So anyway, I brought us up to 1908, 1909, because I want to start to talk about the new kinds of community that emerge. Initially here, the kibbutz, which we talked about a bit last time, socialist or communist communities, initially farming, got into industry. Today, of course, they're largely privatized, but in their heyday, all the property was collectively owned by the kibbutz. There was a rotation of basic community tasks, communal life. Life was very much communally run. People ate together in the dining hall. They didn't really have private kitchens. Even in many of the kibbutzim, famously and controversially, children were raised separately from their parents. In the heyday of labor Zionism, the kibbutz was one of the key ideal forms of life, even though demographically, the number of people who lived on kibbutzim was quite small, never more than 7 or 8% of the Jewish population. And basically what I want to do right now, I'm just going to have the map run, and you'll see gradually these red points, kibbutzim, starting to expand on the map. I'm actually going to just, for the ease of viewing, I'm going to just filter out the Arab community so you can see it. And so we're now in 1924, and you can see that there are quite a number of kibbutzim that have emerged by this point in time. You also see black points. Those are the moshavim. And here we'll go back to the PowerPoint, and you can see, I actually was going to just sort of say the names of the early moshavot, Petach Tikva, Rishon LeZion, Rosh Pinah, Nes Ziona, all biblically inspired names that are have to do with sort of initial founding or being the first. Petach Tikva, portal of hope. Rishon LeZion, first to Zion. Rosh Pinah, cornerstone. Nes Ziona, raise a banner towards Zion. Here you see images of some of the kibbutzim. Again, very small farming communities, often with a lot of greenery, especially when they're in places that are rather moist. And then the moshavim, which start a little bit later. Here you see one of the most famous ones, often considered to be the first, though it's not quite accurate, Nahalal. And what's interesting is that in many cases, the design of these communities was based on security considerations. So Nahalal is particularly famous for its circular design, which was inspired by villages that we encounter actually in Central Europe. Here you see one from today's Germany with a very similar circular design. Basically, the idea being that sort of the key communal assets were in the center, surrounded by the family homes, with the thought that if necessary, the community could be protected in such a format. So if we go back to the map a second, and here we are in the 20s, I'm going to just take us a little bit further forward in time. And we talked about this briefly last time, but again, I just want to highlight this N of settlement that we see. And by the way, of course, as of the end of World War I, we're now in the British Mandate, which initially encompassed both today's Israel and the Palestinian territories and the Kingdom of Jordan. But in the early 20s, Transjordan, that section east of the Jordan River, was lopped off, and the British Mandate of Palestine was just what was west of the Jordan River, what we're basically looking at right here. And so basically, here we are in the early 30s. We have this distinctive N, what scholars call the N of settlement, again, along the coast, down through the Jezreel Valley. Here are what I'm pointing out with the cursor. And then, again, in the eastern valleys to the north. And it's just helpful to look at a map. I don't know why it's insisting on not. Okay. I just need to close this guy down. Okay. I don't even know. I didn't even realize that one was there. Okay. So here we see a topographical map, and you can see the coastal plain, basically flat, and then you can see here the Jezreel Valley in the north, and then these eastern valleys as well. And so you can sort of very nicely understand that these were the focal points of settlement in the initial decades. Going back. Okay, going back here to the map. Okay, so we talked about the Jezreel Valley, and then also important to note that here we did have a major population concentration in Jerusalem. Indeed, in 1931, which is the year that we're in, there were 51,000 Jews in Jerusalem out of a total population of 90,000 in the city. And there were probably about 175,000 Jews in British Mandatory Palestine as a whole. So nearly 30% of the population was concentrated in Jerusalem, and even a little bit more if we add these other communities just outside the city. And as you can see, Jerusalem was sort of rather separate from the major concentrations of Jewish population, again along the coast and in the northern valleys. And this posed major problems for trying to develop some kind of solution, to formulate some kind of potential partition of the country between Jewish and Arab polities. As we can head into the 30s, it was decade of rather significant Jewish immigration to Palestine, especially as fascism rises in Europe. And I want to stop here for a moment. Actually, let's go back a year to 1936. You'll see that there have been some efforts at filling in this, what is called the Jerusalem corridor, basically the passageway through the mountains to Jerusalem. But if we return the Arab communities to the map, you'll see that still, nonetheless, there really is a major gap between the Jerusalem area and the coastal area. Now, in 1936, the Great Arab Revolt erupts. It's both again directed against the British and against the Jews, or against the Zionists. And with that revolt, the British realized that the country is essentially ungovernable, and that some form of partition between the two major national communities is needed. And so, again, in 1937, the Peel Plan was formulated. Peel was a British lord. He was a politician, and he was the person who was commissioned to lead the group that surveyed Palestine and formulated this plan. And basically, this is what the plan called for. The British were not yet ready to throw in the towel entirely on Palestine, and so they insisted that they would control a corridor from the sea to Jerusalem. In essence, a kind of miniature mandate. The Jewish state would, as a result, be rather severed in two, major northern section, then a little bit of the coast to the south. And quite very interestingly, the plan allotted the entirety of the Galilee to the envisioned Jewish state, even though, as you can see here, and if we take away the Peel Commission plan, you can see that there was actually very little Jewish settlement in the Galilee at that point in time. Otherwise, had they given the Galilee to the Arab state, there would have been basically you would have had two patches of Arab state divided by the major concentration of the Jewish presence in the Jezreel Valley. We'll come back to that point in a minute. And the way this was expected to work was that there would be population exchanges between the Arab and Jewish polities in the country. So the Arabs of the Galilee would depart for the Arab state, and Jews whose communities were located in what was envisioned to be the Arab state would then move to the Jewish state. And this was actually there. We have lots of examples of population transfers around the world in this time, perhaps most famously and nearby between the Greeks and the Turks, just a little bit, just a decade or so before. All right, but this, of course, was still a very difficult plan to realize, and Herbert Samuel, who had been the first High Commissioner of Palestine, and at the time was a member of the House of Lords, he described this proposal as envisioning two states that would be, and I quote, entwined in inimical embrace like two fighting serpents. We'll see how, in a few moments, how the partition plan attempted to address these very issues. But first, let's explore the impact that the Peel Plan had. Of course, it was never implemented, but that didn't mean that it didn't make a difference. So let's actually look here. If we go, I want to zoom in on this region, on the Beit Shean Valley. So here we are in 1936, and if we then go forward, you see that there's actually quite a number of communities are founded in the Beit Shean Valley in the ensuing years. This is part of the Beit Wall and Tower program of communities that were founded very quickly, often overnight, often very strategically in relationship to one another. There was an effort basically to, in essence, lay claim to this territory for the envisioned Jewish state. And it had an impact. And I now need to go back to the PowerPoint. And here you see the wall and tower communities mapped out. And in the very center there, you see there were a lot, right here in, again, the Beit Shean Valley. These communities, again, very quickly erected. They were often very basic, hence the name wall and tower, or sometimes one also sees tower and stockade. All right. So in 1946, there was a joint Anglo-American plan that was released, the Morrison-Grady plan. And unfortunately, I don't yet have this integrated into the map, but that is the plan moving forward, resources permitting. But so I'll just explicate what you see here. I appreciate that it's a little bit small. In essence, the British hoped here to maintain overarching control over all of the territory and direct control over the Negev region that you see to the south, and over Jerusalem. You see a little sort of line around space around Jerusalem here. Those two territories would be directly controlled by the British. In addition, there would be an Arab province, which you see here in much of the center of the country, aside from Jerusalem, and much of the southern coastal region, including today's Gaza Strip, and then again in the Galilee, that, as we just saw, according to the Peel Commission plan, would have been allotted to the Jewish state. And then also there would have been a little piece around Jaffa, which was the most important Arab urban center in Palestine. And then the Jewish province would have just been a narrow strip along the northern half of the coast, then the Jezreel Valley here, and then the eastern valleys. So from a Zionist perspective, this was a disappointing retreat from what the Peel plan had put forward, and so there was a perceived need to respond to it. And you'll recall in our first session, we spoke about the 11 points in the Negev, really the high point of this rhetoric of nekudot, or points, in Zionist history. So they were down in the Negev, and we'll just review them here. Here you see these red points, and so when we come to the UN partition plan just a year later, and basically there was also a lot of political pressure was put on the Americans, who, even though they had first initiated the plan, or the pursuit of the Morrison-Grady plan, they actually in the end abandoned it. And so you see, really a year and a half later in the UN partition plan, a rather different situation, in which, yes, Jerusalem now would not be British, but it would Jerusalem and Bethlehem would become an international zone. In the north, the territory allotted to the Jewish state would be more or less the same, the northern coastal strip and the northern and northeastern valleys. But you see that there had actually been the 11 points were successful insofar as they basically helped lead to the Negev being awarded to the Jewish state. You could say that the effort to, as it were, sort of establish facts on the ground, or to expand points, to, as it were, create a map before the map was really laid out, worked, but it also, in a way, led to the idea that where there was a Jewish presence, that would be the Jewish state, and where there wasn't, there wasn't. As we see that most of the Galilee region was not going to be allotted to the Jewish state, both according to the Morrison-Grady plan and the UN partition plan, in contrast to the Peel proposal from a decade earlier.
Can you just bring the Peel up again for a second, just so people, it'd be nice to have them back. Can you bring that up again with the Peel?
My very next slide compares them.
Great.
So I hope this is helpful for people. So here on the left is Peel. You see basically the entirety of the north allotted to the Jewish state, along with most of the northern half of the coastal region. And then we look at the UN partition plan, where that is not the case. But of course, what you don't see, just because there isn't space, is to the south. Actually, I'll go back to the map, and you can see it there. One second. There we are. Just need to zoom out a second. And here. There you see the partition plan. Now, as you can see, the way that the partition plan proposed to deal with the awkward need to sort of merge or unite basically the largely Jewish settled coastal strip and the eastern valleys, as well as the largely Arab settled Galilee and Central Highlands, was to have this point where basically both states would sort of come together at a point. And we have the same thing here to the south, just west of Jerusalem. And I sort of fantasized that it would be cool to establish two partition parks in those spots in the present day, sort of parks promoting coexistence. Alrighty, then just one other thing, an often overlooked feature of both the Morrison-Grady and UN partition plans was that Jaffa would belong to the Arab polity. Yet another complication to the plan. And so here we can actually zoom in a little bit. You see that there's this little bit of green surrounded by the sea, a sea of red on one side, and the actual sea on the other side. Of course, the UN partition plan, was also never implemented. War ensued instead, and really began just after the UN vote approving the plan toward the end of November in 1947. So what I actually want to do right now, well, actually, first, let me just.
Can we take some questions, Daniel?
Yeah, sure. We can take some questions now.
Okay, good. So we do have some questions from the chat. So one, just a kind of fact question that you may or may not have at the tip of your fingertips, whatever, is you said that 30% of Jerusalem was populated by Jews in the time of the mandate. But what the person wants to know overall in Mandate Palestine, what were the percentages? Do you know?
Uh, yeah, so 30. What I meant to say was that about 30% of the Jewish population of the British Mandate of Palestine lived in Jerusalem in 1931. I hope that was clear. Jews were a majority of the population of Jerusalem at that point in time. What percentage were they of Palestine as a whole? Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but it was on the order of, I think it probably was about a third or so at that point in time. That would be my estimate. Certainly the minority. Certainly not.
Right. Well, that is the reality, is that there was not a Jewish majority.
Right.
And that is a fact. That is a fact.
At the same time, there was, of course, part of the issue was that there were a lot of Jews who were very eager because they needed to go somewhere to come to Palestine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the tension, just by looking at your map, you see the reality on the ground.
Yes.
Someone else wanted to know more about how you sourced the material that gave you the information to create.
Yes.
In a way, on the left side, you have the layers, you have all your little codes.
Yes.
So I don't know if you can do this. I'm so tempted with my cursor and I realize I'm not controlling it. But if you were to just click on, say, for example, a majority Druze village, what does the map look like if you click on that? Does that change right now or no?
Well, yeah. I mean, if I click on,
No, on your sort of what I would call your key to
oh,
the left.
here.
Yeah. Is
No,
that
there's nothing here. What I hope, so right now, again, you can filter categories of communities in or out. So if you're interested in just the history of the kibbutz, you can basically filter everything, else out and just watch as the kibbutz emerges and expands and multiplies throughout the territory.
right?
I hope in the long run to have it so that you can actually look, if say you're interested in just looking at majority Druze villages, you could just see those. But in terms of the overall information source, the two main sources are the 1945 British Survey of Palestine, in which they prepared just a detailed survey of all these locales, and then the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics. I think the 2017 or 2018 survey that they did of communities in Israel. And so between the two of them, you basically have pretty good coverage of everything, because they also provide information about year of founding of the community, obviously the location, and to some degree what kind of community it was. They don't always provide adequate information, so additional research has to be undertaken. Um, Historical literature, community websites, there are various ways that we go about doing that. I hope that answered the question. It sounded to me like the question was, where does the information come from that
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah. What is sort of the data behind the data?
yeah.
And then someone else wants to know, is there public access to the project at this point?
Yeah, I mean there is a website, and people can visit it. I will
Can
uh,
we put that in the chat? What is that? Yeah,
yes, yeah, I
to
will.
everyone. Can you add that to the website, to the chat?
Yes, let me just well, here I need to go home for a second. And it's not perfect. I'll be the first to admit it's a work in progress, but yes. Okay. So, okay.
Great, great. Okay, so there you have it. So wonderful.
The best thing
Um,
to go to the main advanced map.
Go
Um,
ahead. Yeah, yeah. So those are the questions we have so far. I'm sure we'll have some others. So thanks.
all right, terrific. So what I wanted to do now is show you. So here we are. We're in. Uh, just, this is now the thing is just right where I don't want it. There we are. So here we are. We're in 1941, and I am going to take us now. We're going to head further into the 40s. 1944 now, 1945. You see very nicely there. You just saw. I'll do it again. You see a bunch of red points appearing in the south. Those are the 11 nekudot, the 11 points in the Negev that we spoke about. And now we just learned that they were established in response to the Morrison-Grady plan and helped secure the Negev for Israel, at least according to these international plans. And now we're going to head into 1947. I'm just going to go move up a little bit more, and then watch what happens as we head into 1948. You see what Palestinians call the Nakba. You see the disappearance of about 400 Palestinian villages in the course of the War of Independence. And that's obviously very dramatic to see. I'll just sort of show it to you one more time. Obviously, the circumstances of these disappearances are much debated, but that they happened, that these communities ceased to exist, is indisputable. And because the changes were happening so quickly, for this period, in addition to that main map that you saw, we've also created a map that goes month by month, and hopefully it'll come up here in just a second. I had it up, but I had to depart from it in order to um, show add the website to the chat. Um, and I'm going to keep talking. Basically, what we're going to be able to see, uh, if everything goes according to plan, is that you can really trace month by month where exactly and when these disappearances happened. Um, just 1 second. See, there's my time bar. Okay, great. So we're just going to pause it for a second and go back. Just not sure why. Oh, there they come. Okay, there are our points. Sorry that took a second, but sometimes it does, especially when you're doing a lot on your machine at one time. All right, so we're going to just sort of go in a little bit. I didn't want to go in that much. Okay. Okay. Give this just another moment. All right, you know what? We maybe can come back to that in questions afterwards. I don't want to lose any more time. I apologize. I had it set up perfectly, but then I left it to get the website for the chat. Okay, so let's now, we're in the post-state period, and what we see here, I'm going to go back here. You see you see the disappearance of Palestinian communities, and you just see an explosion, especially of kibbutzim and moshavim in the early years of statehood. And this was, there's several reasons for this. Of course, there was a desire on the part of Israel to really secure its periphery. Very many of these communities were built, in fact, in the border regions. And actually, we're going to zoom in on some of those border regions. But what I want to actually do, just for ease of viewing, I'm going to filter out everything except the kibbutzim, the moshavim, and the Nachal outposts. All right, so here we are. Let's go back just a little bit to 1948. Okay, so we're going to zoom in, for example, in the north here. And here you see, basically in the course of just a few years, mass founding of communities right on just below the Lebanese border. Let's go down to the south. I'm going to back up here. So here we are, 1947, and we see just in the space of a few years, really the emergence of what we now refer to as Otef Aza, the Gaza envelope, with all these communities founded just beside it. And then especially dramatic, I would say, is the area, this what we call the Jerusalem corridor, this sort of fairly narrow stretch of land leading to Jerusalem, because you see the West Bank basically comes down here and then is right here. So let's go back to 1947, and you see very few communities, really very sparse between the coastal communities and Jerusalem, and then really just a real dramatic filling in that period of time. I want to just back out a little bit, and then I want you to see, I'm actually going to play the map here, and I want you to see, you'll see a bunch of orange points appearing. And this I just want to highlight. I talked about this last week, but one of the ways that a lot of these communities started was as Nahal outposts, basically people doing their military service by basically going to a site that was in essence an army base where some agricultural work was also done, basically to establish a presence in that spot, and then eventually that community would be civilianized and then grow into a normal kibbutz or moshav. So that's an important feature of the settlement history in this period. Alrighty, so in the post-war period, I'm going to restore our communities. Oh, actually, no. What I want to do right now is I want to look at another feature of the early history of statehood. Here we are. We've already gotten to 1962, but I'm going to back up to basically the year of independence. And you see these are cities. And you see they were, there were some, mostly along the coast here in the center of the Jezreel Valley is Afula, which was founded back in 1924. Here, Beit Sha'an, center of the Beit Sha'an Valley. There had been an Arab town there, which ceased to exist. The population was not present after after the War of Independence or after the Nakba, became a Jewish city. And you see some of these, like Beit Sha'an, some of these blue points are squares. And these are the Arei Pituach, or development towns, that were founded in peripheral regions where a lot of the immigrants that poured into Israel in the early years of statehood from from the Arab lands in particular, but not solely, but to a large degree, were basically sent to populate these communities. And so we see here, you see down in the Yeroham, deep in the Negev. Here you have Sderot near the Gaza Strip. Here you have Netivot, Kiryat Gat. Okay. Here Kiryat Malachi. And these are it's this kind of community that the song Ma'ale Avak from Tepex that I focused on in the first session is really satirizing. Basically, this feeling of, oh, there's empty space on the map. There's points are missing. We need to make them. We need to fill in the map. We're going to put people there, whether they want to be there, whether there's real justification for a city or not there. And these communities have had there have been a lot of social problems in these communities as a result. So anyway, the map is keen to also document that part of the story, and so the development towns are marked as such. Here you have Beit Shemesh outside of, just to the west of Jerusalem. Okay, so now I'm going to restore everything, and we're going to start to talk about the post-67 world. And for this, I'm going to actually go back to the slides. I haven't been showing you all the slides there's some fascinating things that we can come back to if we have a chance in the second set of Q&A. But anyway, familiar map, Israel after the Six-Day War, the Golan Heights, West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Sinai, now part of the State of Israel. So here, this slide just shows you the settlements, the communities that were founded in the Sinai Peninsula. And especially if we look to the northern coastal region, there's a whole concentration of communities right here, basically just to the west of the Gaza Strip. In fact, Menachem Begin, Prime Minister of Israel in the late 70s, early 80s, it was his plan to retire to this region of the country. And of course, he ended up being the prime minister who, in exchange for peace with Israel, led to the dismantling of those very communities. Now, right after 1967, famous Israeli general and politician Yigal Allon formulated what has ever since been known as the Allon Plan for how Israel was going to handle the West Bank. And as you can see here, his plan basically accepted that it wouldn't be possible or wise for Israel to take over the entirety of the West Bank because of the massive population that would add, foreign, Arab and presumably hostile population that would add to the state of Israel. But there were other considerations that Israel had. So you see here in the Jordan Valley, adjacent to the Jordan River, just west from the country of Jordan, there was a plan that, for communities basically to establish there to, as it were, secure Israel's eastern border. The majority of the Central Highlands here, the northern part of the West Bank, and then to a lesser extent in the south, I'll come to that in just a second, would basically be returned to Jordan, and there would be linkages between the different sections that would belong to Israel, that would belong again to Jordan. And then also critically, we should look here around Jerusalem, and you see how basically the very narrow Jerusalem corridor was going to be quite dramatically expanded. There had been fear that a foreign army could basically sever Jerusalem from the rest of Israel because the border here was so narrow, and there are a lot of mountains just surrounding Jerusalem, so it's quite easy to shell Jerusalem or attack it from those areas. So there was a desire to expand the Jerusalem corridor. And then here to the southwest of Jerusalem, you see this area labeled Gush Etzion, and this had been a set of communities that had existed actually prior to the War of Independence, and they were very quickly reestablished, and then more were founded in the aftermath of the Six-Day War. And then finally, here in the south, there was sort of a recognition that somehow some kind of connection to Hebron would be maintained. Hebron, as we saw earlier in this class today, had been one of the, well, still, it's the second holiest city in Judaism after Jerusalem, was considered in the Yishuv Hayashan, in the old Yishuv, one of the four holy cities. There had been a long-standing Jewish presence in Hebron going back to the 16th century that only ceased in 1929 after more than 60 members of the community were massacred. And so there were strong attachments to Hebron. And so actually I'm going to go back to the map here. Here we go. And so here, we're going to jump up to 1967 quickly. And let's see, what happens. So we can see here, really quite just in the year after the war, you can see here some of these Nahal outposts established in the Jordan Valley. And if we zoom in here, you can see actually right here, this is Kfar Etzion, kibbutz, that again had existed religious kibbutz that existed prior to the War of Independence, reestablished virtually immediately after the war. Then if we continue, we'll go on a little bit, you see again, these communities in what has come to be called the Etzion block, or Gush Etzion, very quickly established. We're now in 1970. And let's go a little bit more forward in time. So, actually, I'm just going to go a little bit back. But as of 1974, you can basically see that there were quite a number of communities that had been established in the Jordan Valley, and again in this Etzion block, but that was about it. There was already at this point a modest presence in Hebron as well. And then, though, as we move forward in time into the late 70s, you start to see the establishment of more and more communities in the Central Highlands. And that, of course, then becomes a very major story for this map, for Israeli politics, and for efforts to resolve the conflict in some form. And so that's one important feature that we see as we head into the early 80s. Another one that we see, and I'm actually just going to go back to, say, 1978, and I want to just filter out everything except the Yishuv Kehilati, the purple points, the community settlement. So as we saw earlier on, the lion's share of the community founding in the early years of statehood were kibbutzim and moshavim, red and black boxes. These were communal settlements to some degree. The kibbutzim, of course, very socialist. The moshavim, sort of more in the middle between capitalism and socialism. There were different kinds of moshavim. I talked about it a bit last week, that there was some joint ownership or economic cooperation among the members of the moshav, but individuals owned their own houses and typically had their own plots of land that they farmed and reaped the benefits from, or did whatever they did at the community. But as we head into the 70s and into the 80s, it's the community settlement. The Yishuv Kehilati really becomes the dominant form of settlement. And this reflects a shift in Israel, less socialist, less concerned about really sort of having communal life, shared dining, raising kids, collectively shared ownership of all property or some property and so forth. And yet there was still very much a concern as to the cultural makeup of a community, because what distinguishes the Yishuv Kehilati, the community settlement, is that there is a committee that basically reviews applicants, people who want to live there. You can't just show up, buy a house, and move. You have to apply. You have to show who you are, and the community will decide if you are a good fit for the social characteristics of that community. In any case, just a tiny bit more, and let's just, as we head into the 80s, you just see really just kind of lots and lots of these communities on the West Bank, also, especially in the West Bank, and especially also in the northern Galilee region. And that's also an interesting feature of the settlement history in this period. I think not so often really noted, but that two major areas where communities were being founded were, again, the Central Highlands of the West Bank and the Galilee region, also a very hilly region in the northern part of the state, as I said last week, that hadn't really been. There were some communities there prior to the late 70s, early 80s, when this settlement drive really got going, really to enhance, to increase the Jewish population of the Galilee. But it really was only in this period that that really happened. And there are a lot of, I'm actually making a curated, special curated map that documents this, because there's, again, these two kinds of settlement are happening basically concurrently. They both involve communities that are being built sort of on the top of hillsides to a large degree, sort of looking around at the surrounding terrain. Some of the architecture is also quite similar. These distinctive red roof houses that we associate with the West Bank settlements are also prominent in these the Galilee settlements, which are called mitzpim, sort of overlooks. Okay, so that's another feature of this.
Um, Daniel, I'm a little aware of the time. I'm curious, what's your latest, and this has came in the chat too, what is the latest map you have, and is it possible to kind of show us the 19th century map and the map today? Is there a way to do that? Or what's your terminus right now of the project? In
2023. Though I would, yeah, though I would say, yeah, so
up to 2003, is that what you said?
2023.
Oh, 2023. Okay,
So
great.
here's what I can do. Let me put everything back in. What I did want to show and I'll do this very quickly. Let me do this very quickly, and then I will uh, try to satisfy the viewer who asked what they asked. I just want to put everything back in. Um, we'll go basically down to the present. I just want to show, just as I showed the Peel Commission and the partition plans against the backdrop of the communities that exist, I want to do that also for. I just would like to do that quickly for the for the country as we head into the 90s. So for 1997, post Oslo Accords, and I can show you here. Um, what the West Bank looks like. I need to get these colors a little bit more vivid, but you can see this sort of tan areas are areas that are, area A, completely under Palestinian control. Area B, the sort of lighter gray areas that have some sort of basic Palestinian control, and then the green actually that are still sort of completely under Israeli control according to the initial Oslo Accords, or Oslo 1 and then Oslo 2. So here we are in 1997. I'm going to take those out, and I'm going to just whoops, yeah. And I just want to quickly move a little bit forward to 2000, the summer of the Camp David Accords. And I mean, there is some controversy as to what was actually exactly proposed at Camp David, but this is more or less the most sort of common. And so we don't have time to explore this in detail, but what I think is really valuable about the map is, again, as with the partition plan, as with the Peel uh, Commission plan, you can basically sort of see how the proposals engage with the reality of the map at the time. And then we'll just do one more of these. I'm going to go up to 2019 and uh, show you the Trump proposal. That, very interestingly, what sort of has increasingly happened in these proposals is there's a sense that as Israel, as it's envisioned that Israel will annex at least some land in the West Bank, because it's regarded as unlikely that all the settlements there would be able to be evacuated. Some of them are so large at this point that would be hard to expect. Palestinians will need to be compensated in some form with land that is currently Israel. That, however, is not so easy because Israel is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. There isn't a whole lot of land just waiting around for someone to use it. So the plan envisioned giving some land in the Israeli south, extending it to the Gaza Strip. How realistic this is? Well, yeah, not sure.
That's for a profit.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so but let me just to
and
answer.
you're gonna have to sum up. We have a question, and yeah.
Yeah. So what I want to do is here. I'm just going to go to 2020, and I'm going to take that out, and you can sort of see what things look like. And then I'm going to just jump back to the 19th century very quickly. Here we're in 1856. So you see, it's quite a dramatic change, and really, this is a good opportunity to just remind the audience what it is that I'm fundamentally trying to do in this project. One, showcase the just tremendously dramatic changes that have occurred between 1856 and here. I can just basically expand this, um, and you see it, um, and also uh, to really showcase the tremendous variety of communities, certainly among the Jews, among the Jewish communities, but also among the Arab communities. And then, of course, there are those communities that are neither Jewish nor Arab, yeah, in the country. So I think that that's really one. Those are the two main goals, two main assets of the project. So I'll just to say very quickly. So what I've tried to do in these sessions is first introduce you to this rhetoric of points, which has played such a key role in the way that Zionism and later Israel has thought about its task of creating the Jewish map in this region. Just earlier today, I was looking at something of David Ben Gurion, and he was talking about the need to establish a point in such and such a place. Very much part of the rhetoric, and then became part of the culture. And this term inspired this mapping project. And now I've had the better part of two sessions to introduce you to the project. Okay, so yeah, I'll take some questions, and then I'd love to at least just say something quickly about the Imagine points and what I plan to share with the community of viewers via video on that front. So yes.
Okay, so the question that's being asked is actually something I think I can address, and then I'll let you quickly give people a little bit of a taste of what you want to do with the Imagine points before we say goodnight.
Okay.
Someone asked if there are studies, I would call it comparative history, of I'm rephrasing the question a little bit, but of the ways in which British imperialism affected not only Mandate Palestine, but also India, Pakistan, and I would add to the question also South Africa. So I want to alert our viewers, our students, to a wonderful new book by Elizabeth Imber called Uncertain Empire, um, Jews, Nationalism, and British Imperialism. And this young scholar, and the book came out last year with Stanford Press, is looking at that. She's looking at the comparative issues because it's often forgotten that Mandate Palestine, which was bequeathed to the British after the League of Nations, after World War I, with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, it wasn't a given. It was contested. There were a lot of debates whether or not it'd be a mandate or a protectorate. And those debates, and I'm not a legal scholar, but it's important. Those debates also took place in India and also took place in debates in South Africa. So what we're really looking at, besides the issues of Jewish nationalism and Palestinian rights, is that this is the legacy, if you will, of the British Empire. So I'm this is important to me right now because of my own scholarship, but I think it's very, very important that people think about this comparative framework to put Mandate Palestine and its contestations uh, into a larger perspective of the legacy of the British Empire. So that's my 2 cents on that. Um, let's see the chat. Um, Someone wanted to know if they could go back and look at sessions 2 and 1, and the answer is yes. They're recorded, and they're up on the Buildner website, as will this session. And now I'm going to give Daniel the floor for just a few minutes to talk about a pre-recorded video that we're also going to add to the website on the imagination. That is the Imagine points. So go ahead, Daniel.
Yes. So here I'm going to depart these points and just going to go back to the PowerPoint and just jump down to show you this. You've seen it or it's there we go, points of the imagination. So one of the things that's fascinated me as in the course of working on this project and just being sort of cognizant of this rhetoric of points is just that noticing in Israeli literature and also in foreign literature about Israel, uh, the the presence of imagined communities and what they can, how they can cast light on the topics that we are that the project explores. So my argument here is that precisely because settlement, od nekudot alamapa, new points in the map, was so central to Zionist and Israeli history and identity, if you as an author, you as a creator want to reflect upon the society, one of the best ways to do it is actually to imagine a point and then imagine a place and then talk about it. And we can really sort of present a real arc of this kind of creativity going all the way back to really one of the early works of modern political Zionism, Theodor Herzl's Alt Neuland. You see it there up on the left, in which he fantasizes a community called Neudorf, New Village, locates it right near Nazareth. It's very clear where it has to be. And it actually plays a central role in the book. It's really where uh, Herzl puts forward his vision of what this new Jewish society will look like. And it's where Herzl also anticipates what threats might emerge from within to his vision. And it's at Neudorf where that is contested. So that's something that I'll talk about in a minute. You can stretch an arc from that all the way down to a work called Neuland, which I don't have here, by Eshkol Nevo, a very prominent Israeli author. And what Nevo brilliantly does is he actually creates an imagined community um, uh, actually outside of Israel. And the name of the book, Neuland, he's very clearly evoking Herzl. And he creates an imagined community in South America. What he basically does is he takes the sort of the rite of the post-army rite of passage of Israelis, basically sort of clearing their head by traveling around South America, and he revisits the communities that have been established by the Gauchos in Argentina, and he sort of creates this community that then functions as a mirror onto contemporary Israel. And that's really what a lot of the works are that I've collected that you see here and there are others are doing. And so many of the different kinds of communities that we've talked about, the kibbutz, the moshav, the West Bank settlement, are reflected in this corpus. Amos Oz's first novel, Elsewhere Perhaps, set at an imaginary kibbutz. Asaf Gavron's The Hilltop, set at an imaginary West Bank settlement, though it's pretty clear that he's talking about Tekoa. And Ephraim Kishon, uh, you see it here, Ein Kamonim, up on the upper right, it takes place at a fictional moshav in the Galilee. So basically, and it's not just literature, I'll say. We also, the Bikura Tizmoret, the band's visit, first the film, then a famous Broadway show, takes us to Beit HaTikva, the House of Hope, somewhere deep in the Israeli south. And it's very clear that that community is meant to remind us of Petach Tikva, the opening of hope, that first early mother of the Moshavot that we talked about earlier today. So I think there's a whole fascinating world of texts and other kind of creative material. And the point of the presentation I'm going to prepare is to really explore, to really put all these data points, put all this creativity together, and explore what kind of a picture we get. How do these texts reflect back upon Israeli society precisely by imagining places that don't exist or evoking places anonymously.
So
So
we look forward to that. I want to just let people know that when Daniel prepares it, we'll post it on the Bildner Center's website under the page with his course. And I just want to add to his comment, some scholars, it's actually been in the ether for a long time, is the link between nationalism and what's called imagined communities, right? That you can't have a national movement without print culture. That's one of the arguments. It's by a scholar named Benedict Anderson. And that communities are imagined, and then they create a sense of in some ways a sense of putting points on the map, but it's imagined. And what you have here in Daniel's really fascinating mapping project is the real points on the map, where people actually moved, who moved, what their communities were, how it changed over time, what the social, military, political needs were. I mean, one of the things that we could have shown was the disengagement from the Gaza settlements, and also now the vanishing communities in the Gaza envelope, right? Those kibbutzim may not be reestablished. So there's a reality to who lives where, but then you have here in this image the imagination, how national writers, how others have thought about these nikudot, these points. And the fact is, this symbolic imagination plays a role too in how people think about where they live. So we all look forward to that installment. I want to thank everyone for coming again and for your questions. I want to thank Dr. Daniel Stankoken for everything he's given the Bildner Center and will be giving the Bildner Center. He still has an exhibit he's working on a Jericho Labyrinth. Stay tuned for eBlast about that. And I want to tell everyone that we have our next mini course will begin on January 14th. It's a three-part mini course by Dr. Noam Sienna, the Aresti Visiting Scholar for the spring. And the title of that course is Jewish Books in the Islamic World from the Middle Ages until Modern Times. That will be January 14th, 21st, and 28th, 3 Wednesday nights at 7, same time. And then an in-person event with my colleague, Professor Jochen Helbeck, who has a new book out called World Enemy Number One, Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, and the Fate of the Jews. And that will be, again, in person at Trey's Hall. And there, of course, will be other programs that we'll alert you to through our media. I want to thank everyone who makes all of this possible. Sarah Portillo, Program Coordinator, Robin Auerbach, also Program Coordinator, Darcy Marr, our Media and Communications Specialist, and Karen Small, the Managing Director of the Bildner Center. This staff works, as I've said over and over again, tirelessly to produce what we do for the public free of charge. And I want to remind all of you that the Bildner Center is mostly self-supporting, and we really do need your support. And I hope that you will be generous as the year comes to an end. And last but not least, I want to wish everyone a Chag HaOlim Sameach. I hope that you have some lightness in your life right now. It's a pretty dark time. So I hope that Hanukkah does give you some respite, either the light of your family, your friends, or of just delicious sufganiyot or latkes, whatever your cultural food tradition is. And again, thank you, Daniel, so much for these presentations. Good night, everyone.